Over a sumptuous dinner in the dining room of Frank's family mansion, Zuri was introduced to Frank's parents, her smile never wavering as she did her best to engage with Frank's parents. But his mother, Mrs. Peters' icy gaze, sent chills down her spine. Every question, every laugh, every attempt at connection was met with a stiff, unyielding silence. As Frank continued to chat cheerfully, seemingly oblivious to the tension, Zuri's heart sank as she wasn't sure of what to expect. Later that evening, after Zuri had left feeling unsure of what had just happened, Mrs. Peters had a conversation with Frank as his heart was beating fast and he had a lot of questions. He knew that his mother wouldn't tell him why she didn't want him to marry Zuri. It was like a slap in the face, making him feel hurt and unsure. Frank struggled to find the right words to respond to his mother, his mind racing to make sense of the situation. He could feel the weight of her disapproval pressing down on him, threatening to crush the hope that he had nurtured for his future with Zuri. "Mother," he said at last, his voice trembling with emotion. I don't understand. Why can't we be happy together? I mean, Zuri as a lady is of high class, beautiful with an amazing character. Not just that, she's very intelligent and has a promising future. She's all a man wants in a lady." "Frank," she said, her voice low and steady. "There are things you don't know. Things that will make it impossible for you to be with Zuri. I cannot tell you what they are, but I can tell you that if you choose to ignore my warnings, you will regret it." Frank stood before her, shocked by the weight of her words. He wanted to protest, to argue, but he knew that his mother was not one to make such statements lightly. With Frank's heart in turmoil, the conversation with his mother left him shaken and unsure of his future with Zuri. As he stood in the dimly lit study, surrounded by shadows and secrets, he knew that he had to make a choice. He could either trust his mother and let go of the dream he had built with Zuri, or he could follow his heart and risk everything. Which path would he choose, he thought. Frank's mind reeled as he weighed the options before him. On one hand, there was the safety and security of his mother's wisdom, the knowledge that she would not steer him wrong. On the other hand, there was the pull of his heart, the insistent voice that told him Zuri was the woman that he wanted to build a life with. His heart cried out for her. The memory of their first meeting, their shared laughter, and easy intimacy filling his mind. With each passing moment, the choice seemed more and more impossible. If he followed his heart, he risked alienating his mother, the woman who had guided him his whole life. And if he chose to trust her without question, he would be forced to give up the woman he loved, the only woman who had made him feel truly alive. The silence of the study pressed in around Frank, seeming to amplify the sound of his own heartbeat. Finally, he made his decision. With a deep breath, he took a step toward his mother, his face set in grim determination. "Mother," he said, his voice steady, "I understand your concern, but I cannot let go of Zuri. I love her, and I believe that she is the woman I'm meant to be with. I cannot forsake our future for the sake of our fears." Mrs. Peters, her expression unreadable, listened to her son's words in silence. When he finished speaking, she remained still for several long seconds, weighing his words. Then finally she let out a deep sigh. "Frank," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. If this is the choice you have made, then I can only hope that it does not lead you to heartbreak. But you must know that if you marry Zuri, you will not have my blessing." Frank felt a deep sadness in his heart. His mother's words hurt him, but he knew that he had to do what was right for him and Zuri. "I know, mother," he said, in his voice soft. "I wish it was different, but I can't live my life the way you want me to. I'm going to marry Zuri and make a life with her." Mrs. Peters nodded, still looking sad and angry. "If that's the choice you are making, then you will have to deal with it without my help," she said as she walked away. Frank swallowed hard, the weight of his decision settling in his bones. He knew that he would need to tread carefully in the coming days, for he was aware that the consequences of his choice would not be limited to his mother's displeasure. While Zuri, on the other hand, kept on reflecting on all that had happened earlier at Frank's place. She was full of worries, not knowing what to think. She wasn't so sure as to if calling Frank at that time was ideal. Frank wasn't sure of how to narrate the clash he had with his mother, but he knew how communication was key for a thriving relationship. He told Zuri anyway, but not with an assurance that everything was gonna play out fine. They concluded on seeing a relationship therapist, who advised that Frank tamed his mother into speaking up. She might just have a valid reason, he said, and not to worry. It's you both against the world. As long as you two love each other genuinely, we're halfway to solving the problem. There's nothing stronger than true love, and there's no hate stronger than true love, he said, reassuring them that everything was gonna be fine. Months later, after several attempts to get Mrs. Peters to speak up, Frank discovered that it had to do with tribalism, as Mrs. Peters' stepmother, who mistreated her and while growing up, happened to be from the same tribe with Zuri. Ever since she had made up her mind never to accept anyone from her tribe, as the event remained fresh in her memories, not only she was maltreated by her stepmother, but her mother was forced to divorce her father because of her stepmother. She was never gonna forgive her. "The day you introduced Zuri to me brought again fresh memories of my experience with that woman," she said with tears in her eyes as she narrated the old incident to Frank. However, she consented to Zuri's and Frank's relationship, as she wasn't oblivious of the fact that they loved each other so much. She had to come to terms that her experience with her stepmother was a personality thing rather than a tribalistic character. She wasn't gonna let her past affect her son's future. With Mrs. Peters' blessing now secure, Frank and Zuri were finally able to move forward with their plans. They set a date for their wedding, choosing a beautiful venue nestled in the heart of the city, with the best media firms to capture the beautiful moments. The days leading up to the ceremony were a blow of activity, but the couple felt more in love than ever before. As the big day approached, Mrs. Peters seemed to find a measure of peace, as she had also forgiven her stepmother and had let go of the grudges. On the morning of the wedding, she surprised Frank by gifting him with a pair of cufflinks that had been her father's, a symbol of her acceptance and support. The end.